Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hey, how's everybody doing today? And welcome to another episode of Conical Supremacy. We're really glad that all of you have decided to join us today. We got a really great show in front, and I'm kind of stoked because our guest today I've known for over 36 years, and man, it's just going to be a really, really cool thing. I don't think anybody out there really knows our guest and what he's done yet, but let's hang on to that for just a second. And I want to take a second to introduce my co-host and the guy who thought this damn thing up that we do every week, Mr. Doug Tornquist. Doug, how are you, buddy?
Good. How about you?
Oh, I'm trying to hang in there this week. You know, it's post-Christmas stuff.
Yeah, it is. But wow, a new year, 2021.
Thank goodness, man. Let's just move on. You know, as far as that's concerned. What were you up to this week? Anything fun?
No. I mean, it was fun, cleaning up. Kind of, I do what I do for New Year's, which is, stay in and watch the fireworks from my window. And it was,
Well, you told me that you watched one of your favorite movies on New Year's Eve.
Oh, I did.
Holiday with Cary Grant.
It's my new favorite movie, and I have to say it is probably the best New Year's Eve movie that I know. I used to watch the Polly Adler story on home, because that scene with all the girls sitting around on New Year's Day, and yeah. And then I did like George Cukor's last film called Rich and Famous, because the final scene of that takes place between Jackie Bissett and Candy Bergen in a Connecticut farmhouse on New Year's Eve. But I do think Holiday, 1938, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, is probably the best New Year's Eve.
Well, it's first of all, it's a beautiful film to look at. It was filmed in that just wonderful color thing, and Cary Grant was at the top of his game then too. To be honest with you, I think. Um, but who did the score to that? Was that Bernard, or was that who? Do you remember who did the score?
It's too early for Bernard Herrmann, because his first film here was, I think, The Day the Earth Stood Still,
Are
1950.
you serious?
I
I
might
didn't know it was. I didn't know it was that late. I thought he was doing Hitchcock before that.
was working in New York,
Uh huh.
and I read that book, a Heart at Fire Center. Is that what it's called? A fantastic biography of him. But he was not here in the 30s, and that picture was Columbia. I don't remember who did the score. I
Tech Sergeant Quinn, you got it. You got that?
Sidney Cutner.
Sydney, did you hear that?
Okay. Okay.
So the staff writers probably fleshed that out, and that's why it's just such a cool thing.
Yeah.
Especially the old Hollywood thing where, I need parts. I need parts now, now, now. Where's my onion skins? Blah blah blah. I need parts.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's changed any at all. To be honest with you, Doug, the music was always the last thing. It's always been the last thing.
Well, still, the music prep guys, I mean, when a big film is coming up, they work around the clock. I mean, went into one of the music prep houses here, and I was totally unprepared. It's a large room, and it's nothing but workstations. I mean, they could have probably 50 people in there working at keyboards. And they work around the clock when they have these big films. They get the scores at the last minute, and then they work all night to get the parts on the stand by the next morning. So yeah,
Just
it's
I think that's one part of the business that, oh, excuse me, that people really don't take into consideration
well,
is that whole, and actually we were talking a little bit about a future guest of ours,
yes.
hopefully, who is in that zone all the time, and you don't really understand as a layperson what it really takes to get the music on the stands for the guys to play when they're under a time limit as well, because like I said, the music is always the last thing, and the studio and the director want the music yesterday,
Right.
as far as that's concerned. So and you've been under that gun, I'm sure, many times, where it's like, come on, we got to get this done today. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I want to do it again. Sorry, we don't have time.
Yeah. And it's one of those thankless jobs where you never get praise for doing a good job, and you only hear from people if there's a mistake. Um,
Which is unfortunate, because I think they're one of the backbones of the industry as far as that's concerned.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, for most of us, what are we going to play if there's nothing on the stand? I mean, for a guy like me, that's not as big of a deal. But if you've got 50, 60 people sitting in a soundstage waiting to go, that's just money ticking off the clock.
It's expensive. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, kudos to all those people. I really, who was it? Wells used to be like the guy.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah.
Dave Wells. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was just, on site. All right, get it done. Let's do it. And for all of you out there who are, thinking about things to do in the music business, this is one thing that music prep and making sure everything is good. And if you've got finale skills, man, I'll tell you what, you can make some nice money these days as a music prep person, especially now that everything's digital. So sending those files out are easy. You can get them in, you can get them out, and people who are really adept at these programs could be making a serious nice chunk of change right now, considering what's going on with this whole COVID thing. I mean, how do I get parts to you? I mean, are my parts good enough? Or, this type of thing, what program is it coming from? All that kind of stuff. It's just, a friend of mine today is going to send me, he just did an arrangement, and he's going, of this Albione thing that he did a really nice job with for tuba and harpsichord.
Oh, sweet.
So, which I'm always down for because I love harpsichord. But well, what files are you using? How do you want me to format this? Blah, 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 all this other kind of stuff. And you think about it for a second and you go, wow, man, this is really relevant. This is really stuff that we all should know. Because I'm going to find it in my Dropbox. Are you going to send me PDFs? Are you going to send, what's your preferred way? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you've done some at-home recording on a couple of things. How do they usually send you the parts?
You know what? It's these places are so slick. They send me a Dropbox file of completed parts. So they take all the steps up to a regular recording session short of printing out the parts. And so the parts are all prepared and copied beautifully. There are never any mistakes. And then they just send me the parts in a Dropbox file, and I download the parts. And I could either play from my iPad, although I still prefer paper, so I usually print them out.
I agree with you. I mean, there's just something beautiful about 11 by 17. I'm sorry. There is. It's just cool. I mean, maybe that's because I'm a Luddite and I can mark it up and shit like that, but it's still such a great thing. Anything else going on this week? Semester's coming up?
Semester's coming up in a week from Monday, so I've got some prep to do. Yeah, people are going back to work next week. I've got a gig on Tuesday, so I'm excited about that.
I don't blame you.
Yep, and it's been a long break. Last thing I need is another day off, so I'm looking forward to getting back to work. And January is my favorite month, because everything's over. And
yeah, and we all can get back to work. So I wanted you to plug one thing for me, if you don't mind. USC, the studio's got a little Zoom thing coming up, and do you mind plugging that at all?
No, we've got as part of the Voices program through USC, we sought out different voices to speak to our students, and we had Velvet Brown, we had Richard A. White, and we've asked Marcus Rojas to speak to the students, and Marcus is a phenomenal player. He works mainly in New York, and I met him about 10 years ago when he was out here. Just a fantastic creator. He's done some incredible projects. I know he's very respected as a freelance player in the symphonic world, also in the commercial world, as I understand too. I haven't really kept up with him, but and that'll be next Monday at 4 p.m. If anyone wants the link for that, they could find me. I'm not hard to find on the USC website or through this website, and I could supply them with the link.
That's great. So anybody out there who's interested in listening to Marcus talk, I highly recommend that. Great player, great guy, really has embraced the freelance world as far as getting work and stuff like that. And if any of you out there have interest or want, we'll make sure that link is up in the comments section of today's broadcast. Should we go ahead and do this? Because I don't think people are really going to get it until it's on.
We need to allow our guest a lot of time because he's got a lot to say.
He sure does. Like I said, I've known this guy for 36 years or more. And Doug, how long have you known Bob?
Well, I've known of him forever. Our paths didn't really cross. I don't know, maybe I saw him at work a few times, but
right.
In the past few years have I gotten to know him.
Well, Bob and I would see Bob pretty much a couple times a week when I'm walking over to the east side of the park and everything. And I just can't say enough about this guy. I mean, the stories, the longevity. So we're going to play a little bump to bring him in right now. Go ahead, Q. So, my first of all, my apologies, Bob. Everybody out there, this is Bob Burstein of the Disneyland Band. How's it going? My apologies to the audience out there. That was one of the old clips from a handheld video from the 90s. So there you go. That's why that looked the way it did. But hey, Bob, we're really glad that you had the time and interest to show up with us today, man. How are you?
I'm very well and very happy to be here.
It couldn't be better, man. We've got a lot to talk about today, and when we were talking on the tech test, I thought it was 40 years, but you corrected me, and it's actually over 45 years at Disneyland, 5 days a week, uh, forever. So you're kind of like me when you got the gig, right? I mean, it was you were coming out of USC, and all of a sudden, here's this gig waiting for you, right? I mean, is that kind of how it went down, or?
It's a long and interesting story as to a few of the hurdles that I had to jump over in order to get this job. Maybe some of these things are good stories for another time when we have a little more time. But yes, I was in my junior year at USC when the opportunity of a lifetime came along. And the hardest part was not only deciding whether or not to take this job, but to try to present this to my teachers at college, and even worse, my parents, to try to explain to them a 20-year-old in college. It was like telling them that I was going to run away and join the circus. And in other words, my folks are saying, what does a 20-year-old know about life to be making a decision like this? You're on scholarship at school and seem to be on the right track in so many ways. Why are you doing this? And I sometimes you just have to demonstrate, give them a little time to get used to the things that they don't yet know enough about. And I was very happy to just let things take care of themselves that way.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. From the histrionics that I learned from all the old cats there and everything else like that, when you got that gig, you couldn't have come in at a better time. The band was just amazing. The players that you had in there, I mean, most of the old guard was still there, and those guys just, I mean, it must have been just thrilling for you as a young 20 something.
It absolutely was. And even though I was only 20 years old, this was important to me. I was really trying to tune in very closely, intuitively, and try to imagine the value of an opportunity. In 1971, when I began subbing at the park, there were really only 4 what I consider to be full-time jobs in LA. The longest standing, which now is over 100 years, is the LA Philharmonic, of course. There can only be one player in the LA Phil, and I was never destined to be that player with that self-discipline and so forth. Another job was the Lawrence Welk Show. It was on for 20 years, and Buddy Hayes was one of many who played both the tuba and the string bass. And I did get a chance to meet him. I had to get out of bed one night at 11 o'clock and throw some clothes on and go to the Disneyland Hotel. But I was always extremely interested in trying to meet people who could perhaps be among my mentors and teachers and give me advice. And I was SpongeBob when it came to wanting to learn and soak things up. One of the other jobs that was sort of a revolving door, but nevertheless for a while was a steady job of sorts, was the Tonight Show band. And other than getting jobs in the military, the Disneyland band had already been going on for 16 years, and fast forward, was destined to go and complete to the day 60 years before it was replaced, oddly enough, by a generally younger group of fine musicians and good entertainers. They decided to keep the name Disneyland Band, which became confusing for a lot of people. But our particular band, which I think most people know, also had within it some small groups that entertained for short periods in the afternoon. Instead of being shown the door and given us a pink slip, we were invited to remain in those small groups for the full day. And that has carried forward for several years now. One of the 3, unfortunately, was let go, not for lacking in any quality, of course, but 2 of the 3 smaller groups still remain at the park. I'll talk about that a little later. But you're absolutely right when you say I was there at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I got the job at 21, and I'm really thankful because the choices that I had to make at that age, I didn't have to make the same type of choices that other freelancers had to make. And I really think that that's probably one thing that you and I have incredibly in common is that, well, I can do the gig if I want to, because here I am, I'm playing every day, I'm playing 5 days a week, I'm making money, I got benefits, and blah, 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 blah. So you can pick and choose a little bit better. And that choice, did you find that to be a little bit freeing, or did you find that to be a little constraining as far as your career is concerned, or that's that type of a question, I guess?
Well, accepting this job was, of course, not without sacrifice and not without compromise in some areas, of course, and I'm the first to admit it. However, where school was concerned, I pretty much reasoned that if things didn't work out, I could always return to school, complete my degree. And frankly, I have a whole pile of organized notes, but as I've done on occasions when I've appeared, I tend to just throw them all away and start making things up. Where all of that is concerned, again, I've talked about the value of an opportunity. And also sometimes if good timing and good luck are among the things that help you prepare to become a professional musician, you have to take advantage of all those things. And one of the things that was so right for me is that I grew up in Southern California, where there are so many opportunities, so much music being performed and so forth. It was ideal. I had, from the get-go, I had good teachers, parental support, experienced mentors, lots of performance opportunities, and a lot of chances to go and hear and see a wide variety of live musical performances.
Yeah, I actually I can say in earnest that I learned more in my first 10 years working at the park with all the old cats and everything than I possibly ever could have learned in college. What to do, how to do gigs, what tunes to learn, what to, all this type of stuff, how to be on stage, what the hell are you doing, blah, 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 all this other kind of stuff, how to sell it, how to do this, how to make it cool. And especially, I got to hang out with Jack McVeigh and Herb Gordy. And I mean, Jack McVeigh basically invented, rock and roll. He was there every day. I got to talk to him about stuff every day. And I mean, invaluable. Just invaluable. I mean, you got to play with Warren Gale for how many decades? I mean, that's just a beautiful thing. I mean, one of my favorite trumpet players of all time. Just Warren is just unbelievable. Doug, you got to sub for Bob every now and then back in, what was it, the late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I was going to say, and John, just amplifying what you were saying, is, it's not this way now, but when I was in college, well, even before, I mean, Disneyland was where you got your first job, if you were lucky, I mean, every year they'd have this Christmas parade and they would hire like 5 or 6 bands. And those of us who were fortunate enough to get chosen for that were just so pleased to be there. And then all the music students in Southern California, all the brass players in particular, and some of the woodwinds, would be hanging out, in the staging area for the parade. We'd all be practicing and hanging out. And that's where so many friendships, networking opportunities came from. And I think Disney was my first job there. I started working there in '83.
Yeah. And I might add, while it's on my mind, that except for the 5 branches of the armed forces, the Walt Disney Company historically has hired more musicians than any other company in the country over the years.
Yeah. Disneyland was the place where the best musicians in the world came. The Carnation Stage, every huge name in the big bands.
Oh, you name it, man.
And I mean, some of the greatest players in the world came through Disneyland. I mean, people who hold positions in major symphony orchestras.
Well, not only that, but also to remind you that in the first summer, 1955, Our legendary teacher and friend Tommy Johnson worked the better part of that summer. Roger Bobo subbed there on a few occasions, so that was quite an upgrade to the band for the days that they were there. But the bar was always set very high in general for the quality of musicianship, and that's what I miss. The thing that I single most miss since leaving is the quality of musicianship that I was fortunate to collaborate with every day.
Yeah, I can't begin to tell you how much that means to me. I mean, when we have guys come in to sub, they know their stuff. It's not like you got to drag them through it. Or I remember subbing for you, and either Stan or Art would get in my face and go, "Well, that's not how Bob does it." I go, "Okay, I'll do how Bob does it. Okay, fine." And especially on some of the stuff, on some of the Dixieland charts that Wickham did, he'd always write changes in, and you would play the changes, and those guys got so used to how you do it, and you know, you got this young kid coming in playing, you know, 4 under, and he goes, "You know what, take it easy, son, you know, just you know, be cool."
Well, and also to add that at this point in my life, you know, 50 years later, my mission now is, as the saying goes, is to pay it forward and try to give the benefit of my experience and a little knowledge and a little advice to young aspiring musicians in colleges and just whoever I happen to meet. That's really a joy right now, somebody to share some of my stories with, and hope that some of it is useful.
Oh, you know what? I'm really glad that you brought that up right now, because let's go ahead and show this, and I'd really like to tell everybody out there that, in case you don't know, Disney has a great amount of outreach to stuff, and the Disneyland band back in the day was used for that type of outreach, and what an absolute difference it made to kids giving back, getting excited about music and playing instruments. And we're gonna play a little video right now, if that's cool with you, Bob.
Well, go ahead. I also, very early in this visit, I would like to spend not even 2 minutes just also describing generally what my duties were in the band beyond being.
Oh, you know what? Yeah.
We'll do the photos first and then go on the video.
Yeah, let's do that right now. Okay.
Okay.
Because
Okay. Well, in technical terms, I was, as we are called in the music industry, I was a sideman, and I was a doubler. That is a skill set that many people in my generation and people much older than myself saw the value and the practicality and the efficiency of being able to put a couple of different instruments together. In my case, tuba and string bass and of the associated electric basses. When I was at USC, I was not paying as much attention to the bass because my double major, in addition to education, was bass trombone. And I was very lucky to be able to study with Robert Marsteller and Tommy Johnson at USC. I studied with him since age 13. And at the time that Terry Cravens had arrived and was working on his doctor's degree, I had a lot of opportunities to play the bass trombone in the orchestra. But as soon as I got to Disneyland, that definitely took a sideline to the tuba and the bass. So in addition to being that sideman, I basically at one point became the band librarian, which by itself was a heck of a lot of work, considering the variety of activities and the amount of music that was flowing in and out. After that, a couple of years later, I became an assistant conductor, the assistant conductor. Also separate and apart from my musical life, but still related closely. In 1983, which was 10 or 11 years after I first began there, I became the union shop steward, because after 10 years or so, in any job, you tend to have a list of things you like and things you don't like. And I saw the opportunity to become involved with the union and have a direct say in my well-being, as well as all of my colleagues. So there were those things, and I was able to sub in no less than 20 other groups over the years, which was fantastic, just little pieces of experience in the other groups. And also, as many of us in the band did, we had opportunity for creative input to help design some of the shows, in my case, to think up names for a couple of groups. to craft a couple of special arrangements with specific parameters. Just everything about the job was varietal, and we always had challenges. We never knew what the next thing would be, which is contradictory to the fact that so many features of the job were so repetitive. But at the same time, we had things come up that I generally refer to as special events. I could spend a whole hour talking about that, write a book about it even. But we had both repetition and variety, and it really made things exciting every day.
You know, talk about repetition, Bob. I mean, you go through it. I think the audience doesn't really get it, and I haven't really talked about it. But lay down a typical day in the Disneyland band for us.
I'd be happy to do that as the slideshow commences.
There we go. See, talk about segue, baby.
Okay. Now, this is a wonderful picture. This was taken from the steps of the train station and is very meaningful for me. This picture was taken in June of 1971. One of our daily activities, for the most part, was to march down the street and finish our tune at the flagpole, and then play a very varietal concert, several books worth of music, our town square concerts. This particular thing was a staple for us for many years. The conductor in this picture was Jim Christensen. We lost him last year, regrettably, but 3 years from the time this picture was taken, and by the way, this is, as the picture indicates, the cover of the Instrument magazine, June 1971. 3 years after the picture was taken, Jim would leave for Florida in the month of September to take a month to put together the 20-piece band that opened in Disney World. I don't want to belabor you with statistics, but just to give you an idea of the scope of what we're talking about, Disneyland is an 85-acre park. Magic Kingdom in Florida is 25% larger. It's 107 acres. The total Disney property, which now includes 3 hotels, 2 theme parks, and downtown Disney, which is very similar to the Universal City Walk, that entire complex is 510 acres. Florida, which is still not even half developed, is 25,000 acres, which is equivalent to just under 40 square miles, the size of San Francisco. So it's quite amazing, just the comparisons. I was offered the job when I was subbing in 1971, not yet a regular member of the Disneyland band. I was offered the job to go down to Florida and be in that 20-piece band. And at that time, it didn't make sense. I know that the weather down there is pretty miserable. I have family here. I love being in California for the mountains and the beach. And I just very reluctantly thanked Jim and said, no, thank you. And he said, well, you know, probably in a few months, we are thinking about already enlarging the Disneyland band here in California to 20 members for 2 specific reasons. One of them is that we could share libraries in a band the same size. And secondly, since each band has small groups within it that entertain for periods in the afternoon, that would afford Disneyland in California an extra small group to provide more coverage for those hours in the afternoon. So it made perfect sense. And that is how I entered the band as one of 4 additional musicians. Over the years, that number of 20 was cut back once again to 16. But for a while, we functioned even better with 20. Yeah. 16 was always adequate, but those are the circumstances under which I got in.
That's correct.
So go ahead, Quinn, with the next slide. This is, I'll spend 10 seconds on this. During the summer, same thing, town square concerts. By this time in 2006, we had added microphones. We had scripted concerts, a major development in entertainment. So things became a little bit more presentation oriented, but still it's a town square concert. Okay, Quinn, next one. We did a marching. We were a marching band. We marched up and down the street, all kinds of different things. Quite often we would be followed by some of the Walt Disney characters, either marching along with us or riding in one of the old vehicles, or perhaps riding, well, I said vehicles, the old fire engine, double-decker bus. We had a lot of interaction with the characters, and that's just practically everything we did had some measure of characters in it. Okay, On to the next one. After a while, management said, well, you know what? Town Square is pretty much the first thing that all the guests see when they come to Disneyland. And of course, when you're riding in a taxi, you are a fare. When you go into a store, you are a customer. All the people who come to visit Disneyland are guests of ours. And of course, one of the most important things to Walt Disney was always, no matter what job you had, your second job automatically was to be an ambassador to the guests, to make them feel special, to cater to whatever needs they had that were within your abilities to provide. So they moved us right out in front. You can see what we refer to as Floral Mickey, the flower arrangement of the giant Mickey Mouse and the train station. So at some point in time, our first set of the day became the Floral Mickey set rather than Town Square. This was immediate. Sometimes we would even begin our day as the guests were waiting to enter. We had a captive audience because they were behind the turnstiles. So this was, as you can see, another opportunity to do routines with characters. And it was wonderful. It was great.
So,
Next
so
slide.
Bob, was that
Yeah.
Bob, was that medley 1 or medley 2?
All of the above. Next slide, please.
Next one, Quinn.
Next slide, please. In following Town Square or Floral Mickey, we would march to the Sleeping Beauty Castle, play a few tunes in our semicircular formation, and then go across the drawbridge into Fantasyland. And we would, just as you see, we'd climb on the King Arthur carousel, and we would play a couple of tunes. After several years, they mechanically installed a special Disneyland band button, which only in that instance would allow the carousel to go for a prescribed amount of time to give us the chance to play our two favorite tunes, one of which was the William Tell Overture and so forth. We had a good time, and in the hierarchy of Disney management, people clear up to the very top. For them, this was their favorite activity for the band for a long time. Next, the Mark Twain. We'd march through Frontierland as we marched through practically every land in the course of every day. We may stop at the castle to play a tune on the way, but ultimately we landed on the Mark Twain. We had a whole repertoire. All of the titles and repertoire were germane to a 12-minute trip around the rivers of America. When we'd get off the Mark Twain, we would return to Main Street, perhaps by a different route, going through Adventureland or something like that. But the Mark Twain was a pleasure to play on. If you love nature like I do, every spring we saw baby ducks and the whole deal. It was a really nice part of our day. Next slide. All right. After lunch, we normally had a concert at Plaza Gardens. In the early days, it was a very varietal concert, often featuring soloists from within the band, which included yours truly. But as the years went by, Stan Fries, who led the band for many years, made it a high priority that we emulate a large number of the famous big bands who would occupy that stage at night for years, usually a week at a time. We also had a special jazz weekend around Memorial Day in May. But John, you and I probably spent countless hours on that terrazzo floor, learning, watching, listening. We had some great concerts on that stage, and nowadays it's been slightly reconfigured. You really cannot put more than a 10-piece band on that stage now because it has a new name now. It's called Fantasy Fair, like its counterpart in Florida, and is used primarily for character shows. There's a big screen that goes around the periphery to insulate that performance from all the street noise out on Main Street. But that was a wonderful venue for the band, and we featured very often our fabulous barbershop quartet, the Dapper Dans. We just had a lot of fun doing character shows, not only concerts on that stage, but a whole variety of special activities at Plaza Garden.
Hey, before you change that one, I wanted to tell you one story about Plaza, and it's one of my favorite park stories, and that one is the Basie band was there, and Basie was old, but he was there, and they had another piano player sitting next to Basie to take care of stuff because he was kind of just like conducting and being the patriarch that he was. And we would always sit over because we were on lunch or something coming back, and we would go check out the band, and I'd be in costume. So I was trying to be all cool and stuff. But every time that I would always go to every single one, but he was sitting there not playing, and the guy who was kind of playing piano for him was sitting there, and I'll never forget this in my entire life. They're playing like 1 o'clock jump. They're just playing like some signature tune, and I can't remember what it was. But all of a sudden, the piano part comes off, and Basie looks at the guy and goes, just shakes his head, and goes, grabs his hand and pulls it off the keys, and he just turned to him and said, "Wait." And then he said, "Now play."
Good story.
It was probably the coolest thing I've ever seen on a live gig, and especially since Basie is such a hero of mine. It's just was like, and the band was just swinging hard, man. And it's just like, you know, it goes to, once again, like I said, I learned so much by having this job.
Oh yeah,
it's just it's just amazing.
I can't help myself but return with another brief Count Basie related story. And by the way, on his 75th birthday, they made a tremendous ice sculpture backstage and threw him one heck of a party.
I remember
My story very quickly is that Danny House, a longtime lead member in our band, when he was very young, became a 5-year member at least of the Basie band that was all black. He was white and young. And on his first night, he sat right next to the legendary Marshall Royal. They didn't have time to exchange pleasantries, but after the first tune, he heard Marshall Royal's 3 first words to him, and they were, "Push in, son."
To me, just to end this particular slide, because I got stories forever. Did you know that that's the first time Jimmy Ford, Jimmy Ford out there is a great drummer that has worked with both Bob and I throughout the years. But I met Jimmy for the first time on that stage when he was playing with Lionel Hampton, when Lionel Hampton was there for the week. So
Sure.
I've known, and that was like when Jimmy, because Jimmy and I are the same age. So Jimmy was like 21 or 22. And I'd been there about a year, and then Lionel's band came in, and sure as shit. And then I think it was like 6 or 7 years later, Jimmy was full-time at the park.
There you go.
It's just
at this point in time of the day, this is when we would change. We'd go back to the band room, and this is when we'd begin our couple of hours worth of the various small groups.
Right.
And then after that, as the next slide comes up, we would most often perform our patriotic flag retreat ceremony. There were circumstances under which we did not do this for a while, and that was typically each summer, because beginning in 1972, there was, for a 7 or 8 week period, another very entertaining group of young college students referred to as the All-American College Band, and their appearance at Disneyland had 2 purposes. They spent the morning in an educational environment where they had the privilege of meeting and working with some of the talented celebrity names in Hollywood, performers, arrangers, managers, and so forth. They got a heck of an education. Then, after their lunch, they would perform their very energetic, all memorized routines with a little bit of dance choreography from about 2:30 or 3 o'clock until about 8 o'clock at night. And they would be paid a stipend for the summer. It was a wonderful experience for them. And just parenthetically, I want to tell you that the band that replaced us, also known as the Disneyland Band, in so many respects was so similar to that band as far as their energy, the nature of their presentations, very closely similar. So anyhow, I will get to the small groups in a bit, but this retreat ceremony was beautifully remade in 2006, the same year that we had what we called our extreme makeover. In all respects, we had microphones and we had scripted this and that. The new improved retreat ceremony featured appearances by veterans and people on active duty in the 5 branches of the service that were called to the flagpole as their respective military theme songs were being played to receive applause from large audiences and so forth. We had the Dapper Dans appear and sing a medley of patriotic songs. It was a thoroughly terrific patriotic ceremony. And for the first year of that redesign, we also had a wonderful photo opportunity for a set of parents who would, they'd pick a child out of the audience, hand him an American flag, and that also pulled at a lot of heartstrings. It was a very beautifully conceived service at the end of the day. But while the American College Band was there for the summer, they assumed that one particular service that we would do at the end of our day, it was only sort of the beginning of their day, but it would allow us to extend our small groups in the afternoon. And for most of the summer and other occasions, we would finish our day in our small groups and not do this retreat ceremony. But it remains to this day to be one of the very most important musical functions. On the days when we were not there, there was a recorded version where the security detail would march out military style and perform the same ceremony with some recorded music. So the only other thing that I want to add to this long list of daily activities, not that we did every single one, was for a couple of years, we became the Saturday night dance band. Imagine that. It definitely impacted the mornings, which we couldn't participate in for a while because we had to begin our day with those afternoon small groups, change clothes quickly to do the flag ceremony, and then get into tuxedos and play 3 45-minute dance sets down the street at Plaza Gardens. A little extra work for me because I had to run down there and set up yet another band with 4-inch thick books of music. But eventually that Saturday night dance, which included New Year's Eve, became the Sunday afternoon tea dance. It was the same book, the same wonderful dancers, but it really gave us relief on our schedule. And also for many of the people in our band, it provided a lot of financial relief because a lot of our band members were accepting a lot of Saturday night work, which they had to go without during this time. So it all worked out very well. And we really had a lot of fun playing music that was relevant for all the big bands you ever heard of or saw. So that was great. Now, if you would play that school concert video, this is something that I'll make a few comments about, but I'd like you to play that video.
All right, boys and girls, the Disneyland Resort and the Philharmonic Society of Orange County are pleased to present from the happiest place on earth, the world-famous Disneyland Band! And it's wonderful to be here with the Disneyland Band, really partnering with the Philharmonic Society of Orange County to bring music and to bring a theater experience to second graders throughout the Southland. It really exposes them to the culture of being in a theater environment, teaches them etiquette for theater, and really just, it's a fun way to get involved with the music throughout history.
Well, we're so excited about being involved with this program because really it's the first exposure these kids get to see of a live band. The fact that we get to really inspire them and excite them about music really brings a lot of joy to our hearts.
It's fantastic when you look out at the audience and you see the children just bouncing up and down in their seats because they're so excited. And it's even more wonderful when the Fab Five, Mickey, Donald, Goofy, Minnie, and Pluto come out and just infuse it with this huge Disneyland resort energy as well. It's just infectious.
My name is Beth Ruger, and I'm a volunteer with the Philharmonic Society. There is nothing like seeing these children get so excited. And they also learn about music. Adults that now bring their children to the concerts remember when they came to the concert as a second grader.
Well, I hope at the end of the program that they certainly will consider picking up an instrument and playing. I think there's just so much joy in being a musician, and even regardless if they don't become a musician, just that they have a new appreciation for the arts.
Just awesome, Bob.
It's a
Awesome
great
stuff.
video, and I want to give you a couple of quick statistics. We played in the 30 plus years, and this one activity was inherited as well as our flag retreat ceremony by the new Disneyland Band. And those things continued very regrettably for reasons we're still trying to figure out. That program was discontinued a couple of years ago, even for the new band. But the fact remains that we played over 36 years or so to way over 1 million second graders. As they came, they got a program like this one, Mickey Mouse on the cover, pictures of the instruments inside, and also a very special coupon attached to the program that would allow them a free admission when they brought a paying adult. This whole idea, the concert and everything attached to it, was the brainchild of our longtime conductor, Stan Fries. And over the years, not only did we educate all of these kids, but even after expenses, and this was an expensive venture, my rough math indicates or approximates that we made way over $100 million for the company, because all the revenues derived from those kids bringing paying adults who would come to Disneyland, pay for parking, souvenirs, food, you name it, the whole array of expenses. It was a totally worthwhile venture. It was great. And Quinn, if you would now put up this final slide, we received in 2011.
Just a second. He's just about there. There we go.
Okay. We received this certificate of appreciation in 2011. And we were able to get individual copies for all the individual musicians in the band, thanking us for our years of service and the contribution that we made to education in Orange County. We're all very proud of that. So that ends, the segment of our daily activities.
Like I said, working in the D band was probably just a fantastic gig, and both Doug and I got to sub for you. Doug, did you ever get to do any of those school concerts?
No, I didn't. I worked in the park a few times with the Disneyland band. Sometimes I think Bob called me once or twice, and then after Kurt got the job as band director, because Kurt actually, hired me for my first job ever. I'm so delighted he's band director now, but he would remember me and ask me to play. But
that was Make Believe Brass on that one?
I was Disneyland band, because Make Believe Brass ended, yikes, early mid-90s.
Yeah, well, they used to sub in that too, but I was just wondering because, Paul's charts on there are just friggin' just amazing. But, and Bob, when I subbed for you, I had to play on the merry-go-round, and that was not cool. I mean, unless you were looking at the chart, it was like getting ready, especially holding your horn in your lap. It was like getting ready to get sick. Seriously, man.
Yeah, it wasn't like any other job. And we certainly went to, we were very concerned about not only the pay situations when it came contract time, but mostly to our well-being and the working conditions. And over the years, we made a lot of progress in our working conditions. I just wanted to take a minute to just briefly describe some of the other locations outside of Disneyland that we played at.
Yeah,
just
go for it, man. Yeah.
In and around the resort, of course, places like the surrounding hotels, Anaheim Stadium. We did some work at the Civic Center. But beyond Anaheim, we were in parades like the Rose Parade a couple of times, the Hollywood Lane Parade at Christmas time. Occasionally, we'd go to the Disney Studios for various ceremonies. In 1984, when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells arrived, our new managers, they purchased the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Anytime there was a Disney movie premiere, the band went for ceremonial purposes and played up at the El Capitan Theater. For the school concerts, of course, we were at many concert halls and mega churches. There were two occasions that, if we have time, I'll talk about later, where we went on field trips out of town. If we have time, I'll mention those. So lots of different locations aside from just Disneyland. And it was just a varietal job in every respect, whether it was repertoire or venues to play in or activities. Everything about it was varietal. I just can't stress that enough. I'd like to talk a little about the small groups now, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bob. We got no problem with that.
Okay. Well, while Quinn is getting up the first slide, I'll just briefly say that early on in the history of the Disneyland Band, it was recognized by one of the original tuba players, Don Heaston, that there was definitely some individual talent, especially in the Dixieland realm. And he approached the grumbling old colonel of a band director, who happened to be Tommy Walker's father, V.C. Walker. And he said, it's a shame that we can't feature some of these Dixieland people, except for maybe one number a week on a concert. We have 16 people in the band, and this Dixie group from within the band is 6 people. It's a shame we can't create a small group just for them and have them play, various places in the park. And VC Walker was not opposed to that idea. He said, but what if we do this? What will we do with the other 10 people? And Don said, well, I've given this a lot of thought. And he said, I believe, as the first slide, we're at the end now. If we can go back to the other, I'm sorry. No, we're good. Freeze right there. We'll take 4 of the musicians, the reed players, and create this Keystone Cops saxophone quartet. They're perfectly themed on Main Street. So that took 4 of them. And Quinn, I apologize, if you could back up the other way, there you go. How about we take the other people and form a town band? This is the most recent iteration of the town band, known as the Main Street Merchants Association. The premise was that all the proprietors on Main Street would come out of their shops, and one would be a banker or a butcher or the blacksmith or just whatever it happened to be. And the suggestion was that they were all musicians in their spare time. And wouldn't it be great to get these guys together and play in their neighborhood and make a lot of music for a lot of their clients and customers? In the old days, when I first got there, a town band slightly smaller than this actually was dressed in those individual type uniforms. One dressed as a baker, another one as a policeman, and they all had their specific outfits. This also is a very nice homogeneous looking group, the Main Street Merchants. Okay, Quinn, go ahead, pass by the sax group. This is a group called the Hook and Ladder Company. As you can see, they made a home at the firehouse. It was very easy for them to roll the drum kit and the piano back into the fire station. Walt Disney, by the way, had an apartment above the fire station for years, and it was large enough to accommodate his grandkids. And upon completion of that apartment, he made sure that the fire pole in the firehouse was extended so that it could go through the ceiling into his apartment so that his grandkids could slide down and exit the apartment through the fire department. So wonderful group. Unfortunately, they were the ones who no longer are there. I have 3 or 4 pictures of the Straw Hatters. This is my straw hat. I was in this group in many different applications. As the pictures will show, we did shows on Main Street with characters. We'd march back out. Go ahead, Quinn, next slide. In later years, the Straw Hatters, with practically the same outfits, would play on the middle deck of the Mark Twain, and we had a wonderful situation there. There was a piano. For the many times that we utilized a piano player, we had an outstanding piano player in Ray Templin, who was our bass drummer during marching, but he was a heck of a stride piano player and also very worthy during a lot of the big band activities. So we played on the Mark Twain. Go ahead, next slide. When? And this particular picture, sentimentally, is my last day at work. I was a bit of a character at times. I decided to officially retire on April Fool's Day, 2017. And that was taken the other end of Main Street by the Photoshop. Wonderful being in that group. Just great. Next picture, please. Just to show you that at various times we could play some Dixieland with as few as 4 people. Those vests had matching jackets. We referred to that design as awning jackets because they looked like they were cut out from pieces of the awning on the French Market stage. Yeah, well, guess what, dude? That was my first outfit when I was there. And we used to call them fruit stripe gum jackets. Exactly. Sure. Next slide, Quinn. Go ahead. Okay, the Frontier Brass. What a concept, right? We had something going, for every land, for every occasion. This group didn't last very long. Doug, you may recognize Les Benedict in the Indian outfit there. So we had the Frontier Brass for a couple of years. Go ahead, next slide. This is an important picture to demonstrate just where some of our players came from. This was the first small group that I was in, the 6 or 7 piece polka band. Fortunately, one of our reed players in the band played piano and therefore accordion, so we were all set. The gentleman standing in front of me in lederhosen is Danny Cirilli. In 1939, he was in the low brass section of the Pittsburgh Symphony, which was then being conducted by Fritz Reiner. And Danny sat 2 chairs away from a very familiar legendary tuba player who was with Reiner in that orchestra, Arnold Jacobs. A couple of years later, when Arnold Jacobs left to go and begin his legendary tenure with the Chicago Symphony. He took a lot of his favorite musicians with him, including, of course, Arnold Jacobs. Danny decided at that point in time to come to California and begin a 40-year career as a freelancer and never drove a car. How is that possible? A great guy and a fabulous player, had a big sound like Joe Alessi, and he was absolutely a first-rate trombone and euphonium player. He was incredible. Next slide, please. Occasionally, we would have to specialize the design of our groups. In 1995, when the Indiana Jones attraction opened in Adventureland, there are two different groups who occupied alternately during the afternoon, both groups from our band. This is a group aptly named because the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, of course, was where Indiana Jones came from. This group was called the Lost Archaeologists. How clever. When they went on a break, it was my responsibility to develop the remainder of the band. We decided to make the band a 10-piece group. I think Art Dragon was also in on the development of this. I aptly named our group the First Swing Division. It was a military-looking band of 10 that we quickly got dressed in all beige attire, military attire, with black ties, black shoes, and a black belt. Looked pretty military. We put together a 10-piece book that accommodated all of the kind of music that was played during the Indiana Jones movie. And the two groups would trade off just to say that we took just about any place and made it into a stage. Next slide. This was a group in the days when New Orleans was getting special attention. You recall John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd on Saturday Night Live with the Blues Brothers. This is just our best imitation of that. We called it the Brass Brothers. And we had the best time playing all this Motown stuff and R&B and everything that pertained to the look of that group. It was terrific. One of my challenges in the first iteration of this group was to create a mobile bass amp. We actually had to talk with the parade folks about using a deep cycle marine battery because we couldn't plug it in. We had to move it around. I bought a Rubbermaid cart and threw a blanket over it and sort of looked like a magician's table or something, but we were able to move to and from different locations without having to plug anything in. This iteration, which lasted much longer, saw us playing in different locations around New Orleans. We had a wonderful repertoire, even though this kind of music typically featured a guitar and a vocalist or multiple vocals. But because the arrangers within our band were so talented, they made it sound like there was hardly any difference. We just had a ball doing this. I loved it. It was
a great band, Bob. Great band.
Thanks. Next slide, please. This was one of our other bands. This was called the Gloryland Band. And as you can see, we are dressed just like we came from a second line participation in a New Orleans funeral. And at this time, our band was divided exactly in half. These are the white outfits. The Gloryland Band played mostly hymns and spirituals, had a wonderful repertoire. This was pretty much the brainchild of my wonderful colleague, Toby Holmes, who is a fabulous low brass and bass player. The other band was red in color and played more traditional things on the New Orleans property. They were referred to as the New Orleans Street Band. Next slide. They were dressed in these outfits. However, in this particular picture, this was the genesis of a group that we called Swing Soufflé. I was responsible for naming it because, after all, we were in the Cajun area of New Orleans. We had a small group, and we had to come up with a name, so that's the name that stuck. Swing Soufflé mostly played on the French Market stage. We added a fifth player, which was Jimmy Ford, our wonderful drummer. So we were a band of 5. We recorded a really nice CD as we went through those few years. And each one of these groups was just a pleasure. We had wonderful subs who came in and helped us out. Every one of these experiences was unique and very memorable. Next slide. This is the most colorful slide in the show. This is the Pearly Band. If you recall, the Mary Poppins movie that came out in 1964 had several segments that were animated. The Pearly Band supposedly from London. Well, the Pearly Band here, of course, live musicians, emulating, of all things, the animated band from the movie. But this band is terrific, still there, if the pandemic ever gets over with. One of their activities was to participate with Mary Poppins and her companion from the movie, the character Bert. And they would also go inside of the castle and maybe climb on the carousel or play in a few locations around Fantasyland, but a wonderful group also. And that pretty much completes. And these are all, again, in addition to the many, many groups through the years that were separate and apart, these are all groups from within our band. When it got to Christmas time, this particular group, known as the Dickens Brass, was a very functional group on Main Street mostly. That was the look with the long Dickens coats. When the weather warmed up a little bit, next slide, please, we went to a slightly different look. The name changed also to become the Yuletide Brass. That's a wonderful group and terrific arrangements. Just so much to say about this group, so little time. And one of the darling other groups, next slide, please, was the Clarinet Christmas Choir, E-flat clarinet, 2 B-flats, an alto and a bass clarinet, and some bells. And it was just a darling little group. Just on and on and on. This only scratches the surface as to the number and types of groups, special wardrobes. It was fantastic. And this was just a small part of our day. It was great. So much for the small groups. What do you want to do next? I'll tell you what, since time is short, may I take the liberty of talking a little bit about some of the work that I did outside of Disneyland?
No, please be our guest. I mean,
Okay.
I think one of the things, and Doug, when you started there, you were doing a whole bunch of different stuff, just like Bob was. I'm one of the guys who kind of sat there on the West Side and just played jazz every day because I got to. And, that's one of the reasons why I love subbing for you, Bob, was that it was a change of pace for me to actually sit down and read, or to play in some of those other groups like the Make Believe Brass or the Dickens guys or stuff like that, because it was such a great change of pace to have to sit there and stick the charts. But I also remember, Doug, you did a couple of the parades as well. And it's a whole different thing at Disneyland when you do a parade type of thing, because, and you know this all too well, Bob, because usually the D band would be either in the front of the parade or at the back of the parade or something like that. And you guys were like the seasoned pros, but the rest of us out there were sitting there just going, God, when is this going to be done? It's 95 degrees. Come on, blah, 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 blah. And you guys are all looking at us going like, what a bunch of, come on. I mean, do you have any stories back then, Doug, about what?
Well, I remember, okay, my first, gosh, it was Christmas of '82, and I was in the monk band, and of the Robin Hood unit. Yeah, we wore these monks' robes. Those were hot on some of those days. Then about 10 years later, I was in the Royal Band, and that was, it was a real honor to be in that group. But I remember, I was marching down Main Street wearing purple tights and gold shoes with buckles on them, and a red velvet cape and a big purple feather on my hat. And I was glad to be there because the standards of playing were always so high. I was playing with the best players in my generation.
Yeah, and terrific arrangements to showcase all of that.
So Doug, you showed us the picture. Show the picture.
Oh, here's
proof. There we go.
Great. So in the couple of minutes that I just want to spend, not much time.
Come on, Bob. Tell us about the other stuff too.
Okay. This is my work outside of Disneyland over a period of years. First of all, I'll just tell you the two things I never did. I was never in a drum and bugle corps, and I was never on the road. I never traveled on the road with a band. Apparently, according to some people who went on the road with Buddy Rich, that's probably a blessing. But like so many people in our band and so many of the freelance musicians who are our colleagues over the years, I did my share of musicals and playing shows for headliners. Because I was a bass player, I did get a lot of this work. I had the privilege of playing at the Golden West Ballroom, one of the last surviving ballrooms, 3 nights a week for a couple of years. That was a great experience. the bass for most of it, but the tuba, bell front tuba for the waltzes and so forth. That was terrific. I spent a total in 2 different chunks playing the wonderful show, the Laguna Beach Pageant of the Masters. Again, doubling on both instruments for most years, but not all. My share of orchestra and concert band jobs. Parades, just, you get called to do parades. But the 2 things that I was the most proud of were, no particular order, the fact that I had this separate life affiliated with the union. In addition to my union duties at Disneyland, I was elected in 1989 to the board of directors, and I remained on the board for about 24 years. And during that time, really, my concerns, along with others, was to look after the well-being of the members. As I would go to concerts of the Pacific Symphony and various other groups, I always felt pride to be representing them. I'd often try to go down on stage after the performances or during intermission, say hello to some people. But it's a whole different job and a level of responsibility. I participated in specifically Disney contract negotiations every few years. And it was a pleasure to be able to say that I, along with others, including yourself at one negotiations, John, had a hand in trying to better our situation at Disneyland. In addition to the union, I also had 14 years of demonstrating instruments in the Anaheim schools. The picture that's shown was only a brief appearance helping others at the outset of this program to demonstrate brass instruments. But because I was a violinist for 6 years, beginning at age 7, my particular joy was going around with all 4 of the string instruments and becoming proficient enough on viola and cello. I borrowed those from a high school teacher friend. And I would go around, mostly use the string bass as a large teaching aid, and talk about acoustics, talk about just all aspects of playing, made it fun. I had a great time doing it, but after 14 years, I realized that it was doing me out of another thing I liked, which was fall vacations. Fall vacations for me were a combination of 3 things: the beginning of concert season all around the country, the end of baseball, like playoff season, which I was excited with, and fall color. And after a while, I said, I've just got to get out and get more of that. And the concerts at schools came to a natural conclusion. So that's when I started enjoying fall vacations. But again, all of these things just gave me such a varietal life. A few times the New York City Opera called me to play with them because they didn't carry a tuba player cross country. Got to play a few obscure operas. Everything about this job was wonderful because it gave me so many different opportunities at different things. So that's my freelance in a nutshell.
All right. So did you have to play Simbasa?
No, I've never owned one. I've never owned one, to tell you the truth.
We had a long conversation about that on another show. I had to bring it up, Doug. I'm sorry.
I'm sure.
Well, Bob, I just want to say also, in talking about doing this show, it's really been emphasized to me that you are, by passion and just your natural abilities, you are an historian. You have an incredible mind for details and facts, and you remember things and you put them in context in a way that you can explain it to people about why things are so important. And I know you also have a really historic tuba hiding behind your right shoulder in that room.
I do. I'm sorry that you can't see it as much as I thought you'd be able to, but it happens to be a 1904 Lyon and Healy B-flat tuba, probably made by Holton. And it was played extensively back in the 1960s by one of the then active tuba players in Los Angeles named Clarence Carella. And like many other studio musicians at the time, he was an older gentleman. He had a second job, as many studio musicians did, because the body of work very often was divided among several players. His daytime job was a high-ranking official in the sanitation department of Beverly Hills.
No shit.
At the very same time, Tommy Johnson, through the years, was spent many years teaching as a music teacher at Sepulveda Junior High School out in the Valley, not far from where I grew up. That reminds me that I have a little note to mention an old method book way back probably in the 30s or 40s. And this is germane because this gentleman who wrote the book named Arthur Amsden, in addition to the exercises contained within this book, he also took the opportunity, since it was his book, to offer a page worth of what he considered to be sage advice to young aspiring musicians. Two particular suggestions stood out for me, one of which, a rather practical one, according to Arthur Amsden: shun alcohol and tobacco as you would a rattlesnake. That was very clever. And the second one that had even more meaning for a lot of people, even today, he was serious when he also wrote, don't fail to learn another trade in addition to your music. What insight, what foresight, what practical knowledge, even though it was kind of in jest. I always thought that had some value, something to ponder.
Well, I just want to say you had the dream job, you know. I mean,
without a doubt.
I've just been smiling. My face hurts. I've been smiling so much looking at these pictures and the fun you had. And it reminds me of those times I went to Disneyland as a kid and I heard the musicians there and I just thought, how can it sound so good? And it was my dream to work at Disneyland, and I got to, but you did more and you did better than anyone else. And what a fantastic career.
Do we have time? Perhaps we need to skip some of the stuff, but I would really like, in addition to playing that last thing before we run out of time.
Yeah. We'll do that at the end. Yeah.
Okay. I would like, if we are running short on time, I would like Quinn to jump ahead to the miscellaneous photos, which are among the last group. There are only 8 of these.
Do that cue?
Yeah, that's one of them.
That's one of them there? Okay, so
yeah,
let's start there, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well,
So
yeah,
let's
let's go back to the beginning of that. That's about number 3. Okay, there you go. The Emporium, the largest shop on one of the corners of Main Street, paid tribute for many months to the Disneyland band. Whoops, don't, I'm sorry, didn't mean to fool you there, Quinn. Yeah, let's go back to the window.
That's totally on him.
They honored us by dressing up 3 of the most popular Disney characters in band uniforms, and that remained in a very prominent window, which could be viewed by a lot of our guests. And it was really a heartfelt tribute to the importance of the band on Main Street. Next slide. One of the most often asked questions is, were there any gals, were there any women in the band? And on this particular day, there were 4 of them, and they were all terrific, good looking, great players. They are pictured here in what came to be our regular Christmas uniforms. And some of these gals, Deb Avery is now one of the heavies in Broadway. She plays every reed instrument known to man. Adrienne Geffen, now Adrienne Murray, played with us for many years, and she is one of the members of the new Disneyland band now. Cynthia Swanson, wife of Anders Swanson, is a very worthy sax player, and Claire Corshine, one of our trombone players, who travels quite a bit throughout the years on the road with a lot of very fine musical productions. Next slide, please. This was cute. This was Stan Freese's idea. On Halloween, we had the shortest parade. It didn't even last 5 minutes going up Main Street, but he had the nerve, he had the daring presence of mind to go into the magic shop and temporarily borrow enough masks, which had holes to accommodate mouthpieces. And we marched up and down Main Street on that one parade. It shocked the heck out of our managers, so much to the point where when we returned to the band room, Stan had a phone ringing in his office and he picked it up and said, hello. And there was a long pause, and the manager on duty just said, why? And Stan responded simply, well, because it's Halloween, that's why. And he just basically muscled it through, and we all survived, didn't get in any trouble. So one more slide. Years later, we got to have, as with the Christmas uniforms with the gals, we came to have a Halloween uniform. Our Halloween season lasted from practically the day after summer, day after Labor Day, until Halloween itself, which was several weeks. And then immediately upon the conclusion of Halloween, it became Christmas for the next 7 or 8 weeks.
Absolutely.
Going by the calendar. Yeah. On depending on where Sunday, the end of our week, finally fell, it could have been as late as January 7th, where we were still playing Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yep.
We had wonderful repertoire, but Christmas, enough after 7 weeks, right? Okay. Our Dapper Dans, which I talked about before. Sorry, this picture isn't in color, but a terrific group, performed riding on a bicycle built for four, also traveled up and down the streets on the Main Street trolley, multi-purpose group. This is me dressed up as a beatnik. For 4 years or so, we experimented in the late 80s, not only with a school concert for second graders, but this was a show that purported to do sort of an okay job covering the entire history of jazz. At one point, I had to lay down my string bass and run off stage in the 1 minute that the Benny Goodman Quartet was playing, all groups of ours, and change into this beatnik outfit and return so that we could enter the next phase of music history, which in this case was Bebop by Thelonious Monk, I guess. And then Night in Tunisia, Dizzy Gillespie. We had a wonderful concert, but apparently that one wasn't as valuable. They chose to curtail this after just a couple of years. Go ahead. One more slide. Here we are. This is what it's all about. It's just having fun with your colleagues. If I were to put a label on my visit this morning, I would simply call it fun with music. There was a point in time where school kids were invited to a multifaceted day at Disneyland called Fun with Music. In the few hours they were there, they would be escorted to watch various, at least a minimum of 5 different music groups in rotation. And in one of those rotating spaces, they would attend a music show called Fun with Music, featuring 6 live musicians, an AGVA character playing father music, and the famous voice of Disney announcer Jack Wagner. The show began with a timpani roll that went absolutely nowhere except into complete silence when Jack would come on and say, "What if there was no music?" And then a couple of seconds of silence, and he would say, "But that's impossible." And then 3 gals dressed up as melody, harmony, and fascinating rhythm would come and start entertaining. It was a great show. Only lasted a couple of years, but they were always about education at Disneyland, and I hope those school concerts return someday. One more. Well, that's the end. That's my farewell picture. But Quinn, if you have the ability to back it up to the first of those 8 pictures, I just have to show you what I searched high and low for. Is it possible to go backwards? Maybe one more? I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm searching for it. Well, let's go all the way back. Oh, darn. Well, anyway, I had a picture of my very first day that I was at Disneyland. 1955, I was 4 years old. I think that's, Quinn, that's under the lump of history pictures. My mistake, sorry. But anyway, at age 4, I came to Disneyland. Here we go. It's the one before that, I believe, right at the top. Keep going, backwards. This was just to say that there I am, 4 years old, my first trip to Disneyland, picture with Peter Pan in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle. Going forwards. Can we go forwards, Quinn? To the next one? There we go. John, this is for you. John Noriko and I both have the privilege, like Stan used to say, I got my nose fixed, now my mouth doesn't work. We both have the privilege of attending the Interlochen Arts Academy, the year-round school, enrollment just barely over 400 or so, high academic standards, lots of performance opportunities. The year I was there, our orchestra went down to Chicago to play in Orchestra Hall. We went to Atlanta to play in their new center. Our studio orchestra, which was led by the very worthy trombone instructor, Dave Sporney, went to be a guest high school group at the mostly college Notre Dame Jazz Festival. It was a life-changing experience. And I, of course, preceded my attendance at the Academy by 4 summers at the nationally renowned summer music camp, known as the National Music Camp at Interlochen. So lots of history there.
Just amazing, Bob. I mean, it's, wow, what a beautiful, beautiful career you've had. And you had the foresight to document everything to create this beautiful show.
Sorry, Quinn, was there another picture or two in that history collection? Yeah. This is silly, but aside from the carousel and the Mark Twain, in the days of old, the band members would ride on a lot of rides while playing. It was not all about music. It was about fun. Picture our polka band on the People Mover or the Sky Buckets or you name it. Okay, just wanted to get that in there and say that some days we had a little too much fun. This is actually that picture that you just took away is the real live version of this picture in back of me, which is the original band gazebo before they built Plaza Gardens. This is where we gave, not me in those days, 1955, this is where the first band concerts were held. And instead of dismantling this famous gazebo and throwing it in the trash, it was refurbished and set up at the famous nursery in Newport Beach called Rogers Gardens at the corner of MacArthur Boulevard and San Joaquin. And it's still used for weddings and special occasions. The lights around the perimeter still work, and it's still
unbelievable
utilized. And it's, for me, it's just a heartfelt piece of history. A lot of history in this place. So,
well, it's not just a lot of history. I mean, for me, listening to you talk, Bob, I mean, what an absolutely amazing career. I mean, to be able to do all this kind of things, and then now for you to actually, excuse me, to sit back and enjoy what you've done throughout these years and chronicle. I think Doug's right. I think there's at least 2 or 3 books coming out of you on this stuff.
I think so.
I think you should do it, man. I think it would just be great to see. One problem we have though is that we're kind of out of time, and we've kind of gone over. And I'd like to thank everybody for showing up today, and especially you, Bob, for taking the time and getting this stuff together so we could actually, all of us can actually see what it was like and what it is like, you know, to work there for so many years. As somebody who's on his 36th year there and hopefully not going anywhere, because you and I have talked about this at length, what an absolute cool thing it is to have steady work at some place that you don't mind showing up every day, and that you get to play with some of the best guys in the world every day as well. Yeah. I mean, and you know, corporate politics aside, it's really not that bad of a gig, to be honest with you.
No, it's fine. Is there any chance as we leave today that you could play that little snippet at the end of our very last concert?
Actually, it's funny you say that, but I was just going to say my goodbyes here. We're going to end up with a great thing that I actually got to see in person. I got to go over there and check it out, and it was the Old D Band's last day, and we're going to play a video on the way out. But I'd really like to thank Doug and see if he's got anything else to say today.
Nope, I've said it all. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much.
Bob, once again, everybody, Bob Burstein, and you know, thanks a lot, Bob, for being here today.
Thank you so much.
And join us next week, same bat time, same bat channel, for another episode of Conical Supremacy, and we'll let you know who that guest is going to be. But once again, thanks to all of you out there for joining us once a week on All Things Tuba. Here's a little bit of the Disneyland Band, their final concert in the park. And everybody have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.
The Disneyland Band. Thank you so much. Thank you.